Welcome to Slightly Off Script, the marriage show where we remind you that marriage can be stupid good and wicked fun. I am one of your hosts, Bethany Needham, here with Andy Needham. Keeping it safe.
Because we don't fight ever about podcasts.
Except for every trial intro so far on this episode.
This is the first one. What are you talking about?
As far as they're aware.
I love you very much, Bethany.
I love you too.
It's okay. As we've said before, there are moments in your marriage, even if it's stupid good and wicked fun, where you're going to feel a little out of sync.
Yeah, it's fine. We'll get in sync. It's my favorite band after all.
Bye, bye, bye.
You're going to sing that.
I didn't grow up with the boy bands. Like, they're in the periphery because I was in a sheltered Christian home. So
you were the boy band.
Yeah,
what are you
true.
talking about?
That was later on. Like, I'll hear a song and I'm like, is that Backstreet Boys or In Sync? And then I feel like if I ever say that wrong, someone will murder you. Because if you get those two confused,
It was a team. Like, it was a team you had to choose.
What team were you
It was
on?
the Red Sox or the Yankees. You couldn't be both. I was in sync. Yeah, I was not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
JT for life.
Obviously. So, and I ironically also loved Jessica Biel ever since Seventh Heaven.
Oh.
So the fact that my two people ended up together, I'm not sad about it.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, they probably listen to this, so shout out.
Shout out to
to my
the Timberlake
besties.
family.
Yeah, no, I was an NSYNC girl, but Backstreet Boys, I feel like from my perspective, most of my friends were Backstreet Boy people.
You would be the outlier. That's normal.
Maybe it
thing
was
for you.
just a rebellious thing for me. Yeah,
Yeah.
it could be.
That was quite an era of music there.
Yeah, it really was. I was definitely also Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, like,
Yeah. My birthday is very close to Britney Spears' birthday. We're almost the same age.
really?
Yeah.
Basically same people.
Same.
Same.
We both have shaved our heads.
Yeah, yeah. It wasn't a good look on either of you.
Thanks.
Real talk. Let's not go down that road again.
You better pray that I hold on to this hair if you're going to throw that type of shade around.
True. That's a dangerous statement.
Well, speaking of hair, you had your hairs did this morning.
I did. I went to see my girl Sam. Shout out if you're in the Londonderry area. Definitely
Of New Hampshire, yeah.
Of New Hampshire. Honestly, every time she does my hair, I'm like, this is my new favorite. And I think it cannot possibly, like, I love it as much as I'm going. Then this morning, I was like, Sam, now this is my new favorite. And we're not making like drastic
You're just
changes.
getting better every time.
I think she's just rocking it out every time.
You're like a
so.
fine wine.
Fine wine. Yeah, so no, it was great. It was fun to hang out. We caught up.
We have to update people. I realize because we do this recording and then releasing not next to each other, like we have a little bit of runway, giving behind the curtain here. And we did an episode that was like, Bethany's going in for some kind of serious medical tests. And then we didn't say anything about it.
Crickets.
I'm sure people have been just waiting by the podcast, like,
Yeah.
what is happening?
Yeah, well, spoiler alert, I died. No, so testing
Yep.
went as well as the testing could go. And actually, truthfully, until today, we could not have fully updated because I just got the final results of everything in my chart where I chill.
My chart.
And honestly, everything came back as good as it could be and clear. The things that
Clean as a whistle.
clean as a whistle. But no, huge answer to prayer.
Yeah.
There's no like further concern or anything. I just keep on keeping on. So
It's great news.
yeah.
You were a champ. That was the protocol, as we talked about. I mean, even as you modified it because you were a rebel, it was still challenging.
Yeah, that part was a little brutal, but I don't know. I felt like I bounced back fast after everything. I was
think
a
so.
little sore for a couple of days, but I got back in the gym carefully. And yeah, right back into training, back into the powerlifting, getting ready for the competition in July.
What are we going to focus on today?
We're talking boundaries today. Dun,
Yeah.
dun, dun.
Imagine. Keeping some margin in your
Some
life.
margin. Add a little margin in your life. Yeah, this is a big one that I actually feel like I can honestly say I've grown a lot in, and I was really not good at
I agree.
in.
I agree that you've grown in it. I didn't mean to jump on the we're not good at part.
Well, you're not wrong. I was pretty terrible. So, and I've had to learn a lot of it the hard way.
Yeah.
I think experiencing some burnout
Some of
and
it's your personality because you're wired for adventure. I think I have this too in a different way, but I'm wired to say yes to things.
yeah,
Like my default is like, yeah, let's do it. And I've had to learn how to like filter that.
yeah, I dislike disappointing people, and I definitely wrestle with that people pleaser to a not healthy extent. And so, yeah, this is something I've really had to do some work myself and be honest with myself about, really beneath the wanting to do things for people, like where my ego was falling into that and different things that were kind of hard, not pretty things to see in the mirror. And so, yeah, and my new job has given me more opportunities to practice this because it's, when you work in a field that has a high burnout rate, this is something you need to be intentional about is where do those healthy boundaries need to lie. So,
Yeah. Not perfectly, but you've done it really, really well in the beginning part of this job. And I think the two traps that I see for myself, maybe you could think of other ones, but that not wanting to disappoint people is one reason. And then the second one is like the myth that doing more is better. And I think that for me, like because I'm entrepreneurial and I'm always trying to like be a networker and a connector. And like, so I'm always like, oh, I don't want to miss out on that opportunity because that X could lead to Y, then leads to Z, and then da da da. And I have a lot of examples in my life where that's happened. And so that's like, there's a strength there, but then there's a shadow side. And so
yeah.
I think that those are two things. I'd be curious if you think of the other reasons why we struggle, or maybe where you struggle with margin.
Well, I will say to that one, that myth of, more is better. I say a lot to myself. Too much of a good thing is still too much.
That's a good line.
And just to remind myself that just because these are all good things doesn't mean I need to do all of the things. So I think those are honestly the two major ones for me. And I probably lean more heavily into when I have not had good boundaries. It's majority been usually because I'm trying to make other people happy. And again, not in a like, oh, I'm a saint, but is in like, it's about my own stroking my own ego and just not having healthy boundaries. You said it. You have some really good quotes to me around this to teach me boundaries that I've said to many people. The two that are probably the biggest are you telling me the world already has a savior and it's not you is a good reminder to me. And then your shorter one is just fold your cape.
Fold your cape.
Yeah. You don't need to be a superhero here.
No.
So,
yeah, I think the two things I struggle with are FOMO and FODO. So fear of missing out and then fear of disappointing others.
oh, that's good. I like that. FOMO and photo.
FODO.
Photo.
It's a FODO finish. So when we walk through this idea of boundaries and maintaining margin in our lives, we thought today that we would do that through the lens of our cultural values for our marriage. And because I think we've referenced them, but this also be a good refresher. If you haven't been tracking with the podcast for a while, if you're newer to it, we did some episodes early on that kind of go through our 4 marriage values, which they have the acronym CAMP.
Yep.
And so what are the values? Can you remember?
Community, authenticity, mission, and play.
So we're going to talk about the idea of margin and boundaries in the context of community, in the context of authenticity, in the context of mission, and then finally in the context of play. And we'll look under each of these as why it's important, and then some sort of how-tos that we have learned or things we've done wrong and had to correct, which probably would be more of it too. So yeah, when it comes to the first one, which is community, the why is that relationships cannot be rushed.
It's a good word.
What does that make you think of?
I think acquaintances and relationships and recognizing the difference in those two things. Like you can meet a lot of people and spend a lot of time with people, but actual real relationship where you're going beneath the surface with people can't be a microwave thing. Like this is more of a slow smoker, if you will.
Oh, that's a good, I love that analogy. We've been enjoying some,
yes.
I have a new smoker and we've been enjoying some good smoked food.
But yeah,
it always takes longer than you think. That's the thing I honestly have had to learn about when I get a smoker. It's like, He says, it'll be done in about 2 hours. And it's like, and usually not.
Yeah. And it's a good reminder to me that I can have friendships that are enjoyable and like more of a shallow, but the just the gift that depth of relationship brings and the patience that requires over time, but then just how worth it is to have those people in your life. So yeah.
That's really good. That's the why. And the how. There are different concentric circles of relationship that we have. And I think the misnomer here would be that acquaintances are bad, but it's helpful to understand that there are different concentric circles of relationship, because I feel like it helps us calibrate our expectations and to maintain boundaries, like your inner sanctum, that inner circle of people for most of us. And again, these are sort of like guidelines. People are going to be calibrated different. That's like 2 to 4 people that are like your closest inner circle of people, the people. Yeah. And so that's like the intimate circle. For Jesus, that was James and John and Peter. And that's the place of the deepest level of vulnerability. But then if you go out from there, like, and again, using Jesus as an example, he had his 12. And so like beyond the sort of 2 to 4, there's going to be the 5 to 12, like that sort of personal people that are in your life. So it's places of accountability for you. That's an important thing. And then the next one out is sort of your social circle, people that you may get together with, once a week or once a month, and you can kind of pick up with them and you can go deep to a certain level. But that's your social circle. And the kind of principle there is one of availability. And then the largest one, and Jesus did this too, like he had his 70, that's sort of his public facing thing. And that's visibility. I honestly am somebody who and this is, I say this the right way, but like I have a bandwidth for a lot of those kind of acquaintance relationships. I enjoy that. And public doesn't necessarily mean platform. Like for us, sometimes it means standing on stage, but it's sort of just that. It could be how you're known in the community. It could be, the baseball team and the little league group that you connect with, or the larger, like the way that we interact with people that we only see at church once or twice a month. And I think that that's a kind of a paradigm. So what do you think about that?
I have always loved this, and I don't remember if you were the first one that introduced me to this idea of the different circles and defining relationships, but it was very helpful for me early on in setting boundaries, because I realized that my wiring was I felt like everybody needed equal access to everything in my life, and I would, in some ways,
sounds exhausting.
Yeah, I would, and I would lose out on both ends. I would not have the bandwidth to have real, true depth of relationship. But then I also would start isolating from any kind of public persona because everything felt overwhelming. It's
like an on-off switch.
Yeah.
All or nothing. Yeah.
If you go into a group of 80 and you feel internally like you have to offer intimate relationship to all 80 of those people, you're going to tap out pretty quick. So
that line just sounded more funny than...
Take it how you will. It's going to be exhausting either way.
Oh gosh.
Was that too off script?
That's where your vulnerability is not for the masses is a very good principle in many respects. So, but neither is it for 2 to 4 people. So let's just be clear.
Yeah, we should have
That's a different podcast.
I feel like on a marriage, we should have one more circle.
Well, no, there is the marriage circle.
Your spouse.
That's within the intimate circle, and that's the intimate circle.
Fair enough.
The biblically intimate circle.
Yes.
Yes. So I was thinking of an example of this the other week. I'm on a team at the church. I just joined this new group working on an initiative, and there's some people in the church that have been there for a while, but I just didn't know them at all. And so there's this one couple, I'm getting to know a little bit of their story about we're working on a project. And so I was like, hey, I'd be cool to go out to dinner with this couple. And I dragged you along. You had no idea who these people were. This paradigm was good because when we met with them, one of the things that I said, we actually talked about relationships. We talked about it. I said, my agenda in getting together with you guys is not like trying to let's be best friends. It was more like, hey, we are in each other's social circle or in our public circle. Mm-hmm. And so I would just love to kind of hear your story and know more about who you are. And let's just let whatever happens happen. and giving people that freedom. And I think if you don't have that, and this is a huge thing, I think New Englanders in particular struggle with this. I'm sure it's a challenge in other parts of the country. People would say the same thing, but there is this sort of like this sense of like, I have all the friends I need. And there's a huge danger as followers of Jesus in that, because I think we always need to have margin in our life for new people. And now, again, if you fall into what you said, that everybody new has to be my best friend for life, that's exhausting. But if you can see it through this lens of like, yes, I need to always have margin for new people in my life. And some of them may over time move into different concentric circles. Not having boundaries, honestly, it can be an obstacle for true community in the church, and also being able to engage people who are not followers of Jesus. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, honestly, I experienced that this morning in a positive way. I am doing this, working out at this new gym, and I had heard from my coach,
Yeah.
he had said like, oh, you really got to meet my wife. I feel like you guys would get along. And so this morning we actually got to meet for the first time. We were at the gym at the same time, and it was just a really cool connection. We exchanged numbers. We're actually going to do a competition together. And again, it didn't need to be this is going to be my new best friend, but just going into this with this openness of I get to meet someone I didn't know before. Now we do kind of instantly have this thing in common
Yeah.
because we have,
Yep.
and who knows what'll come of it. But for me, it's sort of been a good reminder of keeping that space open to connect. And like, at least for me, I've never been in a place where I'm like, I have too many friends and I can't have more friends. But sort of being in that space of being willing to meet people and open yourselves up to them. And I life is full right now, and so it could have been very easy to be like, I just can't think about one more thing. Like start thinking of people as this like to do rather
Yeah.
than an opportunity for relationship and connection.
Yeah. I think that what you're just describing is something that's really key here, is that the point of boundaries is not, again, to live this removed and monastic perfection, but the reason is to have margin and boundaries in your life is to be able to give your best yes. And I think I want to give people permission here, like in relationship, in community, is that I think this is a leadership principle that Andy Stanley taught years ago. He was talking about in the context of leadership, like don't be afraid to do for the one what you can't do for everyone. Like sometimes as leaders we'll have this thing. It's like, well, I can't make, everything needs to be, perfectly equal. And we had this always thing with our kids. We say like, hey, fair is not equal. And like, you can treat people very fairly in your world, but that is like, honestly, you have to treat people unequally. You cannot, I don't treat my, somebody that I go have coffee with the same that I treat you. Like that would be awkward.
Yep.
Slap him on the butt. No, just kidding.
Who are you having coffee with?
Baseball team. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
But yeah, does that track?
Yeah. No, it's a good word. And again, I always think, I forget who it was that like challenged me with this is, you don't even know the people that you have not met that might end up being some of the most influential, impactful, whatever. Like there's relationships that you may not even have right now that you have yet to meet this person that God has in your life for like, and I just think about that a lot. When you meet people, you just never know.
Yeah. One of your gifts, I remember, like, especially when we were at Chapel of the Cross in Westboro, is that we'd always have eyes at that season where, you're at the same church and you were on staff, like you'd always have eyes for like people that are new. And that's a real gift. Like be that person at your church, like be that aware person. And we would often have like, hey, what are you guys doing after church? You want to come over our house? And the cool thing, like, I think this came up when you were stepping out of your role, was a lot of people said, we didn't end up being like really, really close with the Needhams, but they were the bridge builders that kind of leveraged us into a relationship here. And we're the community. And so like, there is a part of it where it's like having margin for future friends. That person may end up in your 70 or your wide circle, but you might be able to help them build those other circles in their life. And that's a real gift when you can do that.
Yeah. And that's a good picture of like healthy boundaries. It doesn't always need to look like you just saying no to somebody. Sometimes a healthy boundary is you pointing someone in the direction of something that could be helpful to them that isn't you. Like that you aren't the source of everything is somewhat the laying a bound, it's a boundary for yourself too. Like I can't be the answer to everybody's needs, but I actually do love connecting people to other people who, may have the space for that, or they could be a provision.
Yeah.
So,
Well, this could be a whole podcast for me because I always like in life and in work when my friends become friends, that's my best day. So
yeah.
that's great. So community, and then the second value we want to explore is authenticity. And this is a kind of a similar principle to community about the speed of things, but I want to say it this way today, that the why that we need to have margin and boundary in authenticity is that efficiency and authenticity often work in opposition to each other. Like if we are trying to calibrate for the most efficient way of doing things, like authenticity often by its very nature is inefficient.
Yeah.
I don't like that because I like efficiency. Just being authentic.
Just being real. I hate how long it takes to be real.
Have you found that to be true?
Yeah, it's funny that it makes me ponder just even in this moment, but it's true even in terms of authenticity within your own self, like to be real with yourself. My personal experience with this is I'm somebody who in the mornings I need a really good chunk of time when I first wake up to sit alone with God. And I do think a big part of that, obviously, I'm learning from God's word and time in prayer, but oftentimes that's where God often speaks to me and gives me clarity about what's really going on in me. Like, kind of digs down beneath those things I like to think are true and goes after, okay, but what really is at the heart of this? And so for me, even just personal authenticity of being honest with myself about my motives or my heart or where I'm really at requires a slow, quiet, just again, for me, it's aloneness with God.
You're preaching. No, I think the way I look at this, especially like, first of all, I just want to say being authentic with yourself is like the starting point. Like if you can't really feel what you feel and know what you know and be who you are and take inventory, you can't take an inventory. It's like, I don't know. It's so true. So that's starting point. The second thing I would say is that like on the daily rhythms, like I have thought a lot about like what is an achievable goal. Cause like I think that we can have these unrealistic expectations of like, I'm going to spend 5 hours a day in prayer. And so that's like the one spectrum. But then I think then I can have the tendency, then I do have like irreducible minimums. Like I have things I'm like, I don't do less than this, which is good. But then if I find myself always at that point of I am only doing the bare minimum, like I think this would be a challenge. I'm going to speak this challenge over my heart. And I think I want to challenge our listeners, like maybe in the next week, have some inefficiency in your time with God. Like be inefficient with it. And you know, you look at the life of Jesus, that's the Dallas Willard thing, like describe what Jesus was like. And he was like, oh, he's unhurried. And that sense of Jesus, like walked from place to place. He was not afraid of a distraction, whether it was a woman with blood tugging on his robe or a group of children that were with him. And then Jesus went away by himself to pray often. So yeah, I think there's a lot of inefficiency in the life of Jesus.
Yeah, and just that picture of being intentional, but also interruptible.
Ooh.
And what does that look like in our life too? Yes, I think intentionality is a big deal. Like there's always the other side of the spectrum, right? Where I want to be careful that I could just
Yeah.
sit
Yep.
alone in the mornings and be very, I'm just waiting, letting the clock go by. Like, well, I'll just spend time and eventually something will happen. So there's sort of that intentionality, but then when God moves and it's, I've got real intentionality happen and I got my rhythm of I read this chapter and I do this thing and I go through that and God, through his Holy Spirit breaks in to like, am I interruptible? Like, can I set that down? And I've had a couple of moments like that recently, like to be authentic, where I was in my quiet time rhythm and I felt like God really convicted my heart on something. And the only thing I could do to receive it was to set my journal aside and my Bible aside and just get on my knees and be quiet before God and just let it sit. And So yeah, what does that look like in our lives to have that kind of like, again, to be intentional, but also interruptible?
Well, and if we don't have that space where it's like we're aligned in our own hearts with who we are, like that's going to have a huge impact on all of our relationships, but especially on our marriage. And so, and again, when you're in seasons where your margin is thin and you can't really do a lot about it, where, there are people that are like, I can't, but I would challenge that to a measure to say, like, where could you find a little bit of margin? Like, it may not be hours, but it could be, tagging in and out with the kids so you could go for a walk for 15 minutes. It could be like, just thinking about experimenting with that and finding space for it. I think in different seasons of life, it's going to be more or less challenging. But then early mornings, like that's, to me, calibrating our early mornings is like the thing that has probably been the most transformational for me. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I would add to that challenge to recognize when we need boundaries the most, just recognizing that those boundaries are going to be disruptive because if we didn't need the boundary, it wouldn't disrupt anything. It's not sitting on anything. Like you're drawing a boundary over something that needs to be drawn over. And so, yeah, it usually means you got to start saying no to some things. You got to sacrifice some things. And it's okay to go before God with that. God, what is the thing that needs, like, where do I need to set this boundary down? And it might not be a forever sacrifice, but for a season, for me, sometimes that has been sacrificing sleep. Sometimes it's been sacrificing, I love going to the gym in the morning, but I actually sacrifice that I don't go when a lot of the people that train like me, they go the hour before me. And it would be great to be in there and but the thing that I know is that for me to do that would be sacrificing that alone time with God, which I'm not willing to do. And so finding those spaces and recognizing that, again, it sounds terrible, but if we need a boundary, it's going to be disruptive.
Yeah.
And if it's not, then that's blank space anyways. So
Yeah, this sounds so like aspirational, but like you're doing a good job talking about the fact that like there's a cost to these boundaries, and there is a no behind every single one of our yeses, which we'll talk about more as we get into mission. But another thing that I just want to touch on real quickly that I have been trying to focus on is this is with myself, and then it's with others, is the power of questions and having good questions to kind of ponder. And I've had some good coaches, and I mentioned before, like my friend Doug, as I was going through some stuff last year, he asked me a lot of great questions, but one of the questions that stuck with me that I've applied in other contexts is just doing a self inventory of like, where am I feeling resistance right now? Like, what is the thing in me that is like resisting what's in front of me? And is that a holy thing? Or like sometimes there's good resistance and sometimes there's bad resistance. And a lot of it is ego and a lot of it is sinfulness. And so where do I feel, even like in your marriage, where is there friction? Are there areas like that? Where do you see God at work is always a beautiful question. Just to that noticing thing. And then what feels unhealthy? Are there things that are not, again, that sort of over indexing? Am I using food as a coping mechanism? Am I using exercise? That could be any, it could be, again, oftentimes they're good things that we are doing that way. So being authentic with yourself and then in your marriage. So, yeah.
I think you said it during that time too, but I always love the line when you were talking about the resistance is not just where do I feel the resistance, but get curious about the resistance. And meaning oftentimes when we feel resistance, our instinct is to back off. Like we don't like resistance. So, okay, I'm feeling resistance. I'm going the other way. And instead to press in and ask those questions and actually allow that to be something, again, it goes back to weightlifting, right? But that's where growth and strength come from, is actually pushing against the resistance in a way that is like, okay, what are you trying to show me in this right now?
Well, in one area, when it comes to to actual physical intimacy, having these conversations at the right time, because sometimes the resistance shows up in the heat of passion, but and we've had good conversations about different things where it's like, hey, what's behind the resistance to that? Like, is this a preference? Is this a problem? Is this something from your past? Is this like, what is the what's the conversation there, and then being able to give space. Again, it's very inefficient. Like, don't try to be like, let's solve this next week. Like, let's take time and think through those things. And so, yeah, that's been a powerful reality. Anything to add on authenticity?
No.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Mission is next. I wrote down for this one under why that our doing for God can easily distract us from walking with God. And the reason I wrote that is because I struggle with that.
It's going to be like, never. We never.
You never struggle with that?
No.
Okay.
No,
I'll have to do that.
Just kidding.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like this is because I have sort of that desire to achieve and to do great things. This is like a natural trap for me, and one that, similar to what you talked about with community, or just with margins in general, I feel like this is one where I can see massive growth, but it's still a snare that I can easily fall for.
Yeah, I would say personally for me, one of the things that I struggle with is doing for God. So this idea of not having good boundaries in the work that I do, even if it's again, good work, good things, is oftentimes I will do that in avoidance of authenticity. And what I mean by that is if there are things in myself that I don't feel good about or I'm struggling with, or it's almost like I'm trying to override that discomfort, because if I do enough good things, then I don't need to actually slow down and face what's really going on. And it's been different things in different seasons. Sometimes I'm running from doubts that I'm wrestling with in my own faith. Sometimes it can be a sin issue, that there are things that I know that are misaligned in my heart and in my mind. And rather than actually being repentant or facing, owning those things, I'm going to outdo, just going to keep doing for God, like do good things and make up for it. And yeah, the other side for me kind of ties also back into that. I care more about what people think about me than what God actually says about me. And I am hustling in doing for God because I want other people to say nice things about me, rather than resting in what God already has said about me.
Yeah. I often think of, Jethro and Moses, Exodus chapter 15, where Moses is spending dawn to dusk. He's the judge of all the people. He's the best. It says in scripture, like he was the best of all the judges. Like there was no question that he was the very best at it. And Jethro, his father-in-law, comes in, to visit, and he kind of observes him, asks him some questions, is interesting, but then tells him this thing that you're doing is not good. And it's so easy when it's a spiritual activity to kind of just justify not having boundaries, because it's like, well, I'm working for God, like God is pleased with this work that I'm doing. And that's just such an easy trap to fall into. And it's why having rhythms of rest and having Sabbath and having these practices and having boundaries, part of it is that it goes back to what you said before. It reminds us that, God invites us to this interplay in ministry of like, hey, this is God's work and you get to be a part of it. But when we start to think it all depends on us, that's such a dangerous place to be. And for me, like the way that showed up a lot in early ministry is like, I believe the gospel. I believe that I come to Christ with nothing, and that it's only his righteousness that allows me to have a life with God and life forever in heaven. And so I live this, like, I love the idea of grace, but then my reality, I'm living a works-based reality. And so like, it's like, I believe that Jesus died for my sins so I can go to heaven, and now I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to pay it back. And so I think I'm always having to watch for that difficulty there. And one of the ways that shows up for me is like, because again, I love the idea of doing great things for God. But when the things that I'm doing, the programs, the initiatives, the work become more important than the people that are in front of me, that's a dash light. That's like, okay, something's off.
Yeah. I've had to remind myself a lot, even in recent days. I apparently give myself a lot of one-liners, but God's throne is not a love seat.
Oh, geez.
And
You're going to have to unpack that one for me a little bit.
Oh, God's throne is not a love seat, meaning if I find myself trying to crawl up there next to him, like that's it's God and me in the throne running
yeah.
the show. And this reminder is like, no, this isn't a love seat. God is on the throne, and I need to I need to take off my cape,
Yeah.
stay in my lane. And honestly, it shows up more in mission, because when I start
Yeah.
trying to be superhuman, and that's like, to me, that's the dash light of God's throne is not a love seat. And here I am trying to crawl up there next to him. Like
God's throne is not a love seat. That's our new t-shirt coming
yeah.
out.
But no, for real though. And I like to say that I've learned, and for me, so dash lights in that there's one thing about being tired. Like there's a normal part about being tired when you work hard. When I start to get to where I am well beyond and I'm not taking care, like I'm not sleeping like I should, I'm whatever, then it's sort of that reminder to me of like, and I think sometimes as believers, we can even like twist scripture to support this kind of lifestyle, that like his mercies are new.
Spiritual
Like,
masochism almost. Yeah.
yeah, like God's going to give you what you need for what he's called you to. But really, we're twisting that to be like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And he's like, and I think oftentimes God's like, but I didn't ever ask you to do what you're doing. Like, and so, yeah, you can quote it to yourself now. God's throne is not a love seat, y'all, in case you were wondering.
That's good. That's going to stick. You remind me of Greg Dyson, a friend of ours who spoke a lot. He used to say, I only have one throne in my house and it flushes.
Yeah.
He's like, God's throne is very different than that. So anyway, that's awesome. I think that this is great that we're going to end with play, because oftentimes for us, this is the one that like we just don't have margin for. Mm-hmm. We don't think it's that important to do it. And it kind of becomes like the last of our priorities. But what I want to say today is the reason this is so important is that play at its heart is restorative rest. And there's different kinds of, like, there's the Netflix and just like watch and binge and like tune out type of rest. And that's not always bad, but it should not be the only way that we rest.
Right.
Like there's also the take a nap rest, which can be a beautiful kind of rest. But then there's the like actually like finding things that are enjoyable, especially to do together in marriage, that is restorative rest. Like sometimes for us, it's actually, we're so excited because the season's coming, but Saturday mornings at the farmer's market.
Yes.
Just wandering around.
I cannot wait.
People watching.
Fresh sourdough bread.
Yes.
Yes. Bring it. And even like think last weekend we did the mulch.
Yeah.
Which is like, that's pretty good physical activity, but it was so life-giving to be outside and doing yard work and like just. And again, it's not going to be the same for everyone, but what are those things that are restorative, and making sure you actually create margin for them and boundaries around that. I think it's not even just margin. Sometimes we need to protect our play too.
Oh, 1,000%.
Like, cause it will be the thing that gets bumped off. You know what? I feel like I'm making a better generalized statement. For those of you who are listening there is a such thing as people who escape with play.
Yeah.
And actually do need boundaries around.
Like, oh yeah. If you're like golfing every single day and never seeing your children,
yeah. So I want to be like, there is that category. And listen,
that's not restorative rest. That's just escapism. That's not, to me, that's not even play. At that point, you're just actually ignoring your responsibilities.
Right. So
you need a whole nother set of boundaries.
That's not what we're saying. No. But what I am saying is, and I had this conversation with a coworker recently because it had been like a crazy season. They had a lot going on, school, work, all the things. And so I just asked the question. I was like, well, how's your lifting going? Because they're similar to me. They love the gym. And they're like, well, I realized that, if I skip the gym and I hustle, then it gives me more time to work on the papers and everything else. And I remember I was like, well, hold up though. Here's the lie in that is like, we think that like we cut out the thing that's really life-giving because we're like, well, we got all these other things we got to do. But actually what ends up happening, and this is why we're having this conversation, I was like, but really be authentic with yourself. Are you actually being more productive right now? Or now you're miserable, still behind, and you've taken the thing that actually would be restorative out of the mix. But I could easily say that because I'm guilty of that sometimes, where I'm like, well, obviously if I have a million things to do, I'm going to cut out this not quote unquote, not important thing, but it ends up hurting me more in the end because now I'm trying to do all these things tired.
I think that maybe these are two sides of the coin, two sides of a diamond. Because I think that like, I don't think of you going to the gym as being play.
Right.
I actually think that is like, I don't know what to say, how I would even describe it. It's actually different than play. That's actually like a productive rest. You know, like it's good for your mental health.
Feels restorative to me though.
Yeah, it does. But then like play is sort of like the thing that is more like, I don't know. It feels a little different. I don't know. Do you hear what I'm trying to say? I'm struggling for words here.
I hear, maybe I feel like I would almost argue it. I don't think the gym is play for everyone, but it does feel like play for me. Like and it's weird, but
maybe it's actually two different types of play or something like that is what I'm trying to drive at. No, there are definitely people that like the gym maybe like, no, that's just discipline and you're not in that bucket. But I think that part of what I'm describing though is sort of like just things that are really purely for fun.
Yeah.
You know, again, I'm trying this on. Maybe I should have thought this through before I just dived into this water, but let's go back into the bedroom for a second in terms of like, there's a part of intimacy that is more like just staying in your relationship and staying in authenticity. And it's sort of like, there is actually like a discipline to intimacy that is like not a task. That's not how we want to describe it, but it's sort of like just a rhythm that's healthy and helpful. And then there are times where we should create enough margin in our lives. You know, it could be that we are going away on a cruise together. And then that is like, okay, that's more, there's more space here, more margin to be playful.
Yeah.
Does that track?
Yeah. No. And I think there's a lot of things in life that could easily be that. Like think of any activity that you do that has a potential for being fun, but if you put a time constraint on it and you don't give it enough margin.
Mandatory fun.
Yeah, but for real, I think even like as crazy as it is, I mentioned yard work. If yard work is something where we're like, we have got to get this done right now, you know, where it all becomes this super, it kind of does take the fun out of it. But if we create the kind of margin that we can enjoy ourselves, and then it's a totally different thing. So yeah, it could be that there are things in your life that if that same task was given more margin, it actually could become something that's restorative.
So I want to call out something that you have done seasonally, which probably need to do for this summer, but you have done a good job of like creating seasonal like bucket lists or things that like we want to get done.
I think this was just since becoming empty nesters, right? Or did I have done that?
Maybe probably more tapped into that. But like, I remember last summer, like, I don't know if we would, or maybe it was last fall. Like one of those was to go on a hike. And I feel like if we hadn't had that written down, it would have been very easy. And we didn't, it's not about like hitting every single marker. Again, this is having margin does not mean like perfect efficiency, but I would just challenge our listeners, like going into the summer for your marriage, maybe it's with your kids as well. Like I'm not just saying just for you, but what are some things that you want to do?
Yeah. So what made me think of this is I was catching us having a lot of conversations where something would come up and we're like, oh my goodness, that would be so fun. We got to do that someday. But then when we actually had time off, which this is probably very normal, we go to our
defaults.
Like we have our usual thing. Like if we are not intentional, we'd probably eat at the same place, do the same, and some of it is we get to these moments and maybe our brains just aren't in a super energetic creative space. So that's why we end up going to what we know. But when we created this list, I put it on a whiteboard in our house. So we made the list over like a few days. As things came up, we wrote it out. And so then when we had these days off, I would just go to the board and be like, let's do that thing. Like pick the thing off the board. And
we did a lot of them. We didn't do all of them either, but it was great. It was great.
And I also, I realized at the end of the season, I'm like, we never would have actually done all of these things had we have not taken the time, made the list, made it super easy, and then just been flexible on days off.
Because when we don't have a lot of margin, oftentimes we just sit around like, I don't know, what do you want to do?
Well, that's it.
It's You're like how much of our time's watching Netflix is just searching for a show to watch on Netflix. It's the same thing with our play. It's like we're just searching for the thing to do. Yeah.
So when you have sort of that brain energy is make the list then when you're kind of in a good headspace and then let it just be visible.
I also love a quest.
Yes.
So like I'm taking our kids to see the Red Sox play the Braves in Atlanta because this is like my quest with Josiah is to see all the ballparks. It'll be number 17. I don't even know if I've told you this one, but I've decided I'm on a quest right now to see if there's a better Italian sandwich in the greater Manchester and Concord than Jersey Mike's, which is right now my favorite. And so this week I tried a different like pizza place.
Okay.
And
how did it rank?
it did not. It was actually like a super cool pizza place
Yeah.
in Manchester that I kind of want to take you just because the vibes were strong on vibes. The food was like, it was good. It was a B.
Okay.
I need to make a ranking scale or something like that. But anyway, but that's just for me, like that's one of the, and sometimes we'll do that. Like, let's find all the places that have, this type of food or happy hour or whatever it is. I enjoy a good quest.
Yeah. I'm in that same boat. I like that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, climbing the 4,000 footers is a kind of a quest in New Hampshire. That's the 4,000 foot mountain. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm feeling that this year, one of the things I'm really wanting to do is get back into hiking and try hikes I've never tried before. And so I think that will be, it's just a fun adventure. So again, make it visible, make it fun. And then again, you got to draw boundaries to make space for it because these things take time and other things will creep in.
Planned spontaneity is important. So
yes. Yeah.
That's good. I feel like this is one of those ones where I can see both. I need this reminder and I'm like, oh, there's some cool things that I've learned by making mistakes.
It's usually how I learn. Oops, I probably shouldn't do that again. Yeah. And again, I think anytime, if you're listening and if you're on social media at all, we do love to hear from listeners on like, hey, it's nice to know the things that resonate with you, but also if you're like, I would add this to it. Yeah. We haven't learned all the things either. So
what?
Yeah, we haven't. So if you have other things you're like, hey, I would put this on the list, then throw it out there. We'd love to hear from you.
I want to shout out our merch store because we obviously mentioned in previous episodes the Bethany and Needham band apparel, which is still available. But we also have made some slightly off script apparel. And then there's also a couple of different things. Like one of them is a t-shirt that says 8 p.m. bedtime club. Which
last night I was the 6 p.m. bedtime
we don't
club.
there's no t-shirt for
Next
that.
level.
There's a couple of mugs like wicked good husband, stupid good wife kind of thing. So some different things. So go check out, the link will be in the show notes, but check out the merch store. And this would be nice. Maybe your bucket list is to buy a shirt. No,
Add it to your list.
I'm just kidding.
I actually want the mugs. That is on my list because
we get some people to order them, then we can afford them. So.
Yeah. Order yours so I can order mine.
That's great. Well, thanks so much everybody for tuning in. Thanks for getting through this episode. We had I had a rocky start and you endured my...
We had a rocky start.
Okay.
We got through it. We didn't fight once in the actual episode.
That's good.
Yeah. Maybe next time, y'all.
But I have the footage.
True. It was recording.
I love you, babe.
Love you too.
Bye.
Bye.